The day I died, my father was playing solitaire in his corner office while I defended 7 years of my life to a panel of professors who had already decided I wasn't worth their time. That's not an exaggeration. I could see the reflection of his computer screen in the glass of the framed photo on his desk, the one of us at my high school graduation, the last time he'd shown up for anything important. He was flicking digital cards into place while my entire future hung in the balance. My PhD was in biomedical engineering, a fancy way of saying I was trying to teach computers how to talk to brains. Specifically, I was developing a neural interface technology so revolutionary it could have and should have changed the world. It was my life's work, crammed into my 20s, while other people were having lives. I sacrificed relationships, sleep, insanity, all for the sake of a project I believed in, and for the hollow hope of a single nod of approval from him. Dr. Richard Chen, the tech executive who could find time for a merger in Tokyo, but not for his only daughter's thesis defense across town. He'd promised, of course, he always promised. "I'll be there, Maya, front row, wouldn't miss it for the world." The text message arrived right as Professor Albright was questioning the statistical validity of my entire data set. It was a generic, pre-scheduled congratulations champ. Big things ahead. I found out later he'd sent it between calls while closing a multi-million-dollar merger. He hadn't even remembered what day it was. Devastated doesn't cover it. Hollowed out is closer. I went back to the lab that night, alone, because where else was I supposed to go? The world outside felt alien. The lab was my home, my sanctuary, my tomb. I was running a diagnostic on the prototype, my hands shaking, my mind a blizzard of failure and disappointment. A frayed power cable, a puddle of spilled coffee from hours earlier, a surge of electricity that felt less like pain and more like a final cosmic punchline. My last coherent thought was a flash of my phone's screen, lit up on the workbench. The emergency contact page was open. His name was at the top. Dad. And I remember thinking, with a bitterness that tasted like burnt ozone, that he'd probably be too busy to answer the call. Then, darkness. I woke up to the blindingly cheerful posters of boy bands I'd long since forgotten. Sunlight streamed through a window that I knew, with absolute certainty, had been replaced with a double glazing 4 years ago. My room, my childhood bedroom. Not the sterile white apartment I'd rented near the university, but the room with the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling. A dream, I mumbled, my voice thick. A very, very specific death-induced hallucination. My body felt light, 22 and unburdened by 7 years of nonstop cortisol and caffeine. I sat up, expecting the illusion to shatter, but the cheap floral print duvet was real. The scent of my mom's pancakes, a scent that had been absent from my life since she passed away when I was 18, wafted up from downstairs. That was a cruel detail for my dying brain to invent. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and my foot hit a pile of textbooks. Fundamentals of Biomedical Signal Processing. My first-year PhD textbooks. I scrambled for my phone, an old model I hadn't seen in years, and mashed the power button. The screen flickered to life. Tuesday, September 4th, my 22nd birthday. 6 years in the past. The exact day I was supposed to move into my grad student dorm and start my program. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, wild drumbeat. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a hallucination. This was real. I was back. Every memory from my previous life was perfectly intact, a high-definition movie playing in my head. I knew my father's schedule for the next 6 years, down to the minute. I knew which obscure tech startups were about to explode and which corporate giants were teetering on the edge of collapse. I had the complete, refined, and perfected version of my revolutionary research tucked away in my mind. A roadmap with all the dead ends and wrong turns already marked. And most importantly, I knew the exact date, time, and circumstances of my death. A lab accident. Alone. On the night of my thesis defense. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It felt alien on these younger lips. A second chance. Most people would see it as a gift. An opportunity to live differently, to be happier, to fix their mistakes. I saw it for what it was, an opportunity for revenge. I padded downstairs, the familiar creak of the third step a ghostly echo from a life I'd already lived. My dad was at the kitchen island scrolling through his tablet, a frown etched on his face. Morning, birthday girl, he said, not looking up. Big day. Ready to start your new life as a starving student? In my first life, I'd given a nervous laugh and tried to engage him in a conversation about my research, only to be met with distracted grunts. This time, I just leaned against the counter, watching him. You look stressed, Dad. He finally glanced up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Just a Q3 earnings projection. Market's volatile. I took a sip of orange juice that tastes shockingly vibrant. You should dump your stock in Omnicorp. They're about to lose a major government contract. It'll be public by Friday. Their shares will tank. He scoffed, a dismissive little puff of air. And where did you hear that? The grad student gossip forum? Just a feeling, I said, shrugging. I then named a small, insignificant semiconductor company. Put the money in Ethereum Systems instead. They're about to announce a breakthrough in chip fabrication. The stock will triple by Christmas. He stared at me, his corporate mask slipping for a second. I wasn't his nervous, approval-seeking daughter anymore. I was something else. Something he didn't recognize. I saw the gears turning in his head, the quick calculation, the flicker of greed. It's your birthday, he said, forcing a smile and changing the subject. I left a gift for you on the table. It was a card with a check inside, the same amount as last time. Enough to be generous, but not enough to require any actual thought. In my first life, I'd been pathetically grateful. This time, I picked it up, looked at the number, and slid it back across the counter towards him. Thanks, I said, my voice cool and even. But I think I'll be making my own investments from now on. I walked away, leaving him staring at the check, a look of profound confusion on his face. The game had begun. He didn't know it yet, but I wasn't just his daughter anymore. I was his judge, his jury, and if he wasn't careful, his executioner. I didn't confront him. What would have been the point? Hey, Dad, fun fact. I died in the future because you were a neglectful workaholic, but don't worry. I got a cosmic do-over, and now I'm back with a vengeance. Yeah, that would go over well. He'd ship me off to the nearest psychiatric facility before I could say temporal paradox. No, a direct assault was for amateurs. I was playing a longer, quieter, and far more satisfying game. My campaign began subtly. I was the ghost of business future, haunting the edges of his corporate life. Over breakfast, while he scanned financial news, I'd make an off-the-cuff remark. Funny how everyone's investing in physical data centers, I'd say, staring into my cereal bowl. Seems like a waste when decentralized cloud networks are obviously the future. Someone could make a killing by shorting companies that are over-leveraged in server hardware. A week later, a major data firm would announce bankruptcy, and the business world would be shocked. Everyone except me. And I noted with grim satisfaction, my father, who would have that tight, thoughtful frown on his face as if he'd seen it coming all along. I became his lucky charm, his oracle. That merger with the German firm? It's going to get bogged down in EU regulatory hell for 18 months. The real prize is the small startup they're trying to acquire. Buy the startup before the merger is announced. Don't launch the new tablet in Q4. The supplier for the main processor has a fatal flaw in their production line. It's going to be a massive, humiliating recall. Push the launch to Q1 of next year and switch to a different supplier. I fed him a steady stream of bullseyes, each one more specific and more profitable than the last. I was using my perfect memory of the next 6 years of market trends, tech breakthroughs, and corporate blunders as my weapon. He never asked how I knew. He was a man who didn't question miracles. He monetized them. He started listening, then relying on my hunches. He even started inviting me to his stuffy dinners with his executive buddies, parading me around like some kind of business-savvy prodigy. My daughter, Maya, he'd say, puffing out his chest. She's at the university doing some science thing, but she has a real nose for the market, a natural. I'd just smile, a polite, vacant smile, while inside I was cataloging their weaknesses, their ambitions, their secret deals. I was a spy in the house of my own father. The twist, the moment I knew this was going to be even more depraved and delicious than I'd imagined, came about a year into my new life. He was on a video conference call in his home office, the door slightly ajar. He thought I was at the lab. I heard his voice booming with a confidence that was entirely unearned. And that's why our 5 year plan needs to pivot, he declared to the grid of faces on his screen. We're not just a hardware company anymore. The future, gentlemen, is integration, seamless, bidirectional neural interfacing. Imagine a world where thought alone can control devices. A world without accessibility barriers. This isn't science fiction. This is the new frontier, and it will be our frontier. My blood ran cold. He was spouting my thesis. Not just the general concept, but my specific, nuanced language. The bidirectional detail, the focus on accessibility, those were the cornerstones of the work I had bled for, the very ideas I had just started mapping out in my new old research. He had taken the passionate, excited ramblings I'd shared with him over dinner, testing the waters, seeing if he'd engage, and had repackaged them, stolen them, and was now presenting them to his board of directors as his own revolutionary vision. I stood in the hallway, completely hidden, and listened as they ate it up. They praised his foresight, his genius, his bold leadership. He soaked it in, a proud monarch accepting the accolades of his court. I didn't feel anger, not a shred. What I felt was a profound, chilling clarity. It wasn't enough that he had neglected me. It wasn't enough that he had failed me. He was a parasite. He was a thief who had found his ultimate mark, his own daughter. I backed away from the door silently. My plan had been to make him respect me, to force him to see me. But now, that was thinking too small. He wasn't just going to see me. He was going to see me dismantle his entire world using the very ideas he thought he could steal. He wanted to claim my frontier? Fine. I'd let him march his army right into the middle of it. Then I'd burn the whole map. Direct confrontation was a fool's errand. A shouting match would get me nowhere. He'd gaslight me, call me emotional, and then just be more careful about where he stole his ideas from. No. If you want to take down an empire, you don't storm the castle walls. You poison the wells, bribe the guards, and become the trusted advisor to the king, all while secretly digging a tunnel under his throne. My public life was that of a dedicated, if unusually fast-moving, PhD student. My secret life, however, was where the real work was being done. I started a tech blog under the pseudonym Daedalus. The name felt appropriate, the master craftsman from Greek myth, creator of the labyrinth. I was building a labyrinth of my own, and my father was the minotaur at its center. On the Daedalus blog, I didn't just drop hints. I laid out detailed, devastatingly accurate analyses of market trends, corporate strategies, and emerging technologies. I used the cool, detached language of a seasoned industry analyst, but my predictions were so prescient, they bordered on prophecy. Post title, The Lithium Bubble: Why 3 of the top battery suppliers are about to implode. 2 months later, a scandal involving falsified performance data rocked the industry. Post title, Quantum computing is a red herring. The real revolution is in neuromorphic chips. I published my post a full year before the mainstream tech press caught on. The blog exploded. At first, it was just a few tech geeks and day traders. Then, venture capitalists started linking to my articles. Then, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies were quoting Daedalus in their shareholder meetings. I became a phantom, a ghost in the machine of Silicon Valley, and my word was gospel. I built a network through encrypted emails and burner phones. I was a faceless kingmaker, connecting investors to startups I knew would succeed and warning them away from disasters I had personally witnessed in my first life. I had the cheat codes to the global economy, and I was using them to build an army. Meanwhile, back at the university, I was flying. Knowing every pitfall and failed experiment from my previous attempt meant I could streamline my research. I completed in 2 years what had originally taken me 5. My supervising professor was astounded, calling my progress unprecedented. All the while, I kept feeding my father just enough information to keep him dependent, to make him think he was the genius. The major twist, the one that turned my intricate game of chess into a high-stakes demolition job, came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. He'd asked me to find a copy of an old tax return in his study. While searching through his filing cabinet, my hand brushed against a thick, unmarked envelope tucked away at the back. It wasn't from the IRS. The return address was a P.O. box, and the envelope was heavy, expensive paper. Curiosity, a trait I'd honed to a razor's edge, got the better of me. Inside wasn't a document. It was a single sheet of paper with a casino's letterhead, the kind of opulent, high roller establishment that doesn't advertise on billboards. It was a marker, a gambling debt, for a staggering amount of money, 7 figures, and it was horribly overdue. The note at the bottom was not a polite reminder. It was a thinly veiled threat that mentioned collateral and personal liability. Suddenly, everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. His workaholism, his relentless drive. It wasn't just ambition, it was panic. The long hours, the frantic deal-making, the desperate need for my lucky stock tips. He wasn't trying to build an empire. He was trying to outrun a monster of his own making. The company wasn't his golden chariot, it was his crumbling shield. My predictions weren't just making him look good to his board, they were funding a desperate high-wire act of insider trading to pay off dangerous people. I put the letter back exactly where I found it, my hands steady, my mind a whirlwind of ice and fire. This changed everything. He wasn't just a neglectful father and an idea thief, he was a cornered animal. And cornered animals are predictable. They get sloppy, they get desperate, and they do things that can land them in prison for a very, very long time. I went back to my room and opened my laptop. It was time to stop digging a tunnel under his throne. It was time to start rigging it with explosives. A cornered animal doesn't just get desperate, it seeks a final dramatic escape. I knew my father. He wouldn't go down with the ship. He'd try to scuttle it for the insurance money and flee on the last lifeboat. My job was to make sure that lifeboat was aimed directly at a jagged reef. The first piece of my trap was the timing. It had to be perfect, a symphony of destruction where every instrument played its part at the precise moment. I went to my PhD advisor. "Professor Albright," I said, putting on my most earnest, bright-eyed student face. "I've had a breakthrough. I'm ready. I'd like to schedule my thesis defense." He blinked, taken aback. "Already, Miss Chen? You've only been here for—" He checked his calendar. "A little over 2 years. This is highly irregular." "The research is complete," I said with unshakable confidence. "I'm ready to present." We settled on a date a few weeks out, a Friday afternoon. I knew, from the ghost of my past life, that this specific Friday was the day of his company's most critical annual board meeting. It was the day where he had to present his grand vision, my vision, and secure the funding that would either save the company or signal its demise. In my first life, he chose the meeting over me without a second's hesitation. I was counting on him to be just as predictable this time. "Dad!" I called out that evening, waving the confirmation email like a winning lottery ticket. "I got my defense date." He pulled up his digital calendar. I saw the flicker in his eyes as he saw the conflict. The mask of fatherly pride slipped on, as ill-fitting as ever. "Oh, honey, that's fantastic. But that's the same day as the big board meeting. It's the whole enchilada. I can't miss it." "Oh," I said, injecting a pathetic, believable tremor into my voice. "I understand. The company comes first. I'll make it up to you," he promised. The same empty words from a lifetime ago. "We'll have a big dinner to celebrate. The best restaurant in town." "I'd like that," I lied. The second piece of the trap was priming the board. His creditors were getting aggressive. I knew that from a second, more threatening letter I'd intercepted. He was running out of time. So, I created a new burner email account, this one with a more official-sounding handle, like Corp Integrity 101. I drafted a careful, anonymous message to the board's lead independent director, a stern woman named Helen Shaw. Subject: urgent, fiduciary responsibility concern regarding CEO Richard Chen. Dear Miss Shaw, as a concerned stakeholder, I feel it is my duty to bring a potential risk to your attention. It has come to my knowledge that Mr. Chen is currently managing significant personal financial liabilities that may present a conflict of interest and pose a material threat to the company's stability. I urge you to exercise your due diligence before the upcoming board meeting. I have attached a document for your review. The attachment was a heavily redacted but still damning copy of the casino marker. I blacked out any information that could trace it back to me, leaving only the terrifying number and the threatening language. It was just enough to light the fuse. They wouldn't be able to ignore it. They'd have to confront him. At the meeting, the third piece was the audience. I logged into my Daedalus account and sent a special bulletin to my inner circle of followers, the venture capitalists, the tech titans, the market movers who hung on my every word. A special announcement from Daedalus. For years, I have operated from the shadows. On date of my defense, I will be stepping into the light. I will be presenting my core research, the very foundation of the neuromorphic and interface predictions I have shared with you, at a public academic forum. This is not a product launch. This is the science behind the revolution. Attendance is, of course, optional, but for those who wish to see the future before it becomes the present, the details are below. I knew they wouldn't be able to resist the mystery. The legendary Daedalus revealing himself? They'd be there. The final, shocking piece of the puzzle fell into my lap by accident. To make his insider trades and move money to his creditors, my father had been using a series of offshore shell corporations. He thought he was clever, but he was sloppy, using the same weak password for his personal cloud storage as he did for everything else. My mother's birthday. It was a pathetic, sentimental gesture from a man who was anything but. I logged in, and there it was, a hidden folder labeled contingency. It wasn't just gambling debts. He'd been systematically embezzling from the company for the last year. Falsified invoices, padded expense reports, shell vendor payments. It was all there. A neat digital trail of grand larceny. And in a subfolder named Exit Plan, I found a scanned copy of a one-way ticket to a non-extradition country dated for the evening of the board meeting. He wasn't just trying to save his company, he was planning to fleece it, dump the carcass, and disappear forever. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. The trap wasn't just a trap anymore. It was a goddamn masterpiece. He thought he was walking into a meeting to save his career. He was actually walking onto a stage, custom built by his daughter, for the final act of his public self-immolation. The day arrived, painted in the crisp, bright hues of a perfect autumn afternoon. I felt a surreal calm settle over me as I put on a sharp, dark blazer. It felt like armor. In my first life, this day was the peak of my anxiety, a mountain of hopes and fears. This time, it was just the final page of a script I'd written myself. My father, as predicted, chose the board meeting. He gave me a quick, distracted hug in the morning. "Knock 'em dead, champ," he said, his eyes already a million miles away, focused on the lies he was about to sell. "I'll be thinking of you." "I know you will, Dad," I replied with a serene smile. He had no idea how true that was. The hack was surprisingly simple. In my first life, I'd done some consulting work for his company's IT department as an intern, a favor he'd framed as a great opportunity for me. I knew their systems inside and out. They used a popular high-end video conferencing system for their boardrooms, but they were notoriously lazy about security patches. I discovered a back-end vulnerability years ago that allowed for a remote, undetectable host to hijack screen-sharing privileges. They never fixed it. I had written a small, elegant piece of code. When I plugged my laptop into the university auditorium's projector system, it would send a silent, encrypted signal to the corporate headquarters across town. This signal would ping their system, authenticate using credentials I knew they hadn't changed, and seamlessly merge my presentation feed with his. Whatever was on my screen would be on every single one of his. The 40-foot-wide monitor behind him, the individual tablets at each board member's seat, every screen in the building. They were all my canvas now. I stood at the podium in the half-full auditorium. My professor gave me a nervous but encouraging nod. My friends were in the front row, buzzing with supportive energy. In the back, I spotted them, a half dozen of the most powerful people in technology and finance, the followers of Daedalus, looking around with intrigued, predatory curiosity. I took a deep breath. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice clear and steady. "My name is Maya Chen. My presentation is titled A Novel Framework for Bidirectional Neural Interfaces, Architecture, Application, and a Case Study in Corporate Malfeasance." A few confused murmurs rippled through the academic crowd. My professor shot me a baffled look. In the back, the investors leaned forward. Click! I advanced to my first slide. Simultaneously, in a sleek, glass-walled boardroom miles away, my father was facing the music. Richard, Helen Shaw said, her voice like ice, we have a problem. We have received some disturbing information regarding your personal finances. My father started to bluster, a wave of practiced indignation rising on his face. This is an outrageous accusation. My personal life is... That's when the 40-foot screen behind him flickered to life. It wasn't his meticulously prepared slide deck that appeared. It was my face. My title slide, with its provocative subtitle, was displayed in crystal clear 4K. Every tablet on the table mirrored the image. My father froze, his mouth hanging open. The board members stared utterly bewildered. The fundamental challenge in neural engineering has always been one of translation, I said, my voice echoing in 2 rooms at once. How do we convert the brain's analog electrical signals into a digital language a computer can understand? I began my defense. I laid out the science, the math, the elegant, beautiful research that I had bled for. The research he thought was his. On screen, I showed a slide detailing the unique polymer I'd used for the electrodes. This material was the key breakthrough. It required a significant initial investment, a seed fund, if you will. Click. The slide changed to a scanned copy of his first major insider trade, the one based on my tip about Ethereum systems. Some might secure funding through illicit stock trades based on non-public information. My approach, thankfully, was university-sponsored. The boardroom was silent. Helen Shaw was staring at the screen, then at my father, the pieces clicking together in her sharp mind. I continued, my pace deliberate. The next hurdle was data processing, creating an algorithm that could filter the signal from the noise. I looked out at my audience. It's a process of identifying and isolating core truths from a storm of corruption. For example, click. My next slide was a complex flowchart, but woven into the diagram were the names of his offshore shell corporations. If your data stream is being deliberately polluted by fraudulent entities, you need a robust system to trace those false inputs back to their source. One of the tech titans in my audience, a man who had made billions based on a Daedalus tip, gasped audibly. He recognized the concepts. He was realizing that the anonymous genius he followed wasn't just a theorist. She was standing right in front of him. My father was ghostly white, gripping the edge of the table for support. He was trapped. The ultimate goal of this technology is transparency and accessibility, I said, my voice rising with passion. It's about giving a voice to the voiceless. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that those who commit fraud are held responsible. Click, the final slide. It was a clean, simple list. On the left, a list of dates. On the right, 2 columns. The first column was titled, Dr. Chen's Claimed Innovations. The second was, My Research Milestones. They were a perfect match. And at the bottom of the slide, in bold, stark text, was the routing number and account number for a bank in the Cayman Islands. And it's about knowing exactly where the money is hidden, I concluded. In the boardroom, all hell broke loose. The board members were on their feet, shouting. They weren't just looking at a failed CEO anymore. They were looking at a fraud, a liar, and a thief who had used their company as his personal piggy bank. And the proof wasn't coming from an anonymous email. It was being presented, live and in excruciating detail, by his own brilliant daughter, the true source of every idea he'd ever claimed as his own. The internet moves at the speed of schadenfreude. Within minutes, my thesis defense was no longer an academic presentation. It was a global event. Someone in the audience, probably one of the VCs in the back, had started live tweeting. Then someone else started streaming it on their phone. The story was just too good. The genius daughter, the corporate thief father, the live high-tech takedown. #Thesis Revenge and #Daedalus revealed were trending worldwide before I'd even reached my Kwanda session. The thesis committee, Professors Albright, Miller, and Shaw, a cruel irony on the name, were in a state of catatonic shock. They'd come expecting a dry, technical defense. Instead, they were witnessing a corporate assassination. To their credit, the science was undeniable. My research was flawless, groundbreaking, even without the soap opera theatrics. They were stunned, but they were also academics. They asked their questions, I answered them concisely, and they had no choice but to pass me with distinction. The drama was just bizarre, horrifying window dressing on a piece of unimpeachable scholarship. As Professor Albright was stammering through his congratulations, my phone, sitting on the podium, lit up. Dad. The call notification was projected 10 feet high on the screen behind me for the whole world to see. I let it ring once, twice. Then, with a quiet, deliberate movement, I pressed the decline button. Apologies for the interruption, I said to the committee, not missing a beat. As I was saying, the potential applications for spinal cord injury patients are particularly promising. The crowd, both in the room and online, went wild. It was the ultimate power move. He was watching his world burn down on live television, making his one desperate call for help. And I calmly, coldly, sent him to voicemail in the middle of explaining my research methodology. The final twist wasn't for the crowd. It was for the law. As I wrapped up my final answer, I put up my acknowledgement slide. It listed my advisor, my lab mates, my friends, and one final name. And finally, I said, making direct eye contact with a camera I knew was still streaming. I'd like to extend a special thanks to my primary collaborator in the final phase of this project, Special Agent Davies from the FBI's White Collar Crime Division. His team's assistance in cross-referencing financial data and building a comprehensive evidentiary portfolio was, to put it mildly, invaluable. Thank you. That was it, the final nail. I wasn't just a vengeful daughter with a PowerPoint. I was a state's witness who had just publicly announced the completion of a federal investigation. My father, watching helplessly in that boardroom, finally understood. This wasn't just a corporate coup or a family meltdown. It was a checkmate he never saw coming. As the board members backed away from him like he was radioactive, two quiet, serious-looking people who had been standing by the boardroom door stepped forward. They weren't corporate security. Their badges were federal. I didn't see his arrest myself. I was too busy being mobbed by the investors from the back row, all clamoring to shake my hand, shove business cards at me, and ask me when Daedalus was going to start her own company. I saw it later, of course. It was on every news channel, the footage shaky but clear. Dr. Richard Chen, the visionary tech CEO, being led out of his own headquarters in handcuffs, his face a mask of utter, soul-crushing defeat. He had lost everything on live television, orchestrated by the one person he had never, not once, truly seen. Victory tastes strange. It's not sweet, not exactly. It's sharp, clean, like the air after a thunderstorm. The aftermath of my defense was a whirlwind. I didn't just pass. I became a legend. I had job offers from every major tech firm and research institution in the country before I'd even taken off my blazer. The venture capitalists who had followed Daedalus weren't offering me jobs. They were offering me blank checks to start my own company. "Name your price," said the titan who'd gasped during my presentation. "We'll fund it. Just keep doing that." The real victory, the moment that will be seared into my memory forever, didn't happen in a boardroom or a lab. It happened on the steps of the university library. I was walking out, the heavy, leather-bound case containing my newly minted PhD diploma in my hand, my friends chattering excitedly around me. And then I saw him. He was being led from a dark, unmarked car to a police cruiser, a procession of two. Just him and a uniformed officer. He was in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, his face haggard and gray under the afternoon sun. Our paths intersected for a single, perfect, cinematic moment. He was being taken away, a symbol of ruin, while I was walking free, a symbol of triumph. For the first, last, and only time in my life, he was forced to be present for my moment of success. He stopped. The officer escorting him paused, a flicker of confusion on his face. My father's eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, locked onto mine. The bravado was gone. The corporate mask was shattered. All that was left was a broken old man. "Maya," he rasped, his voice cracking. The sound was pathetic. "Maya, please, I'm sorry, I never meant—" He broke down, a full, ugly, snot and tears collapse right there on the manicured university lawn. He was begging for forgiveness, for a do-over, for a shred of the connection he had spent a lifetime incinerating. I looked at him not with hatred, but with a strange surgical detachment. I felt nothing. No pity, no rage, no satisfaction, just closure. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just spoke the truth, calm and quiet and final. I died, I said, and he flinched as if I'd struck him. And then I came back. I gave you 6 years. 6 years to choose me just once. Over a meeting, over a deal, over a game of solitaire. You chose yourself every single time. I held his gaze for a moment longer, letting the words sink in. Then, I turned and walked away, my friends forming a protective circle around me. Leaving him to the consequences he had so meticulously earned, I didn't look back. 6 months later, the sign on the gleaming glass building read Phoenix Neurotechnologies, my company. Funded by the investors who'd witnessed my thesis defense, staffed by the brightest minds I could poach, and led by the woman formerly known as Daedalus. We weren't just a startup, we were a phenomenon. My neural interface technology, free from the clutches of my father's greed, was fast-tracked for clinical trials. My face was on the cover of Wired and Forbes, the headlines screaming things like, "The genius who live-streamed justice," and "From PhD to CEO in a single afternoon." They called me a visionary, a disruptor, a force of nature. I was just a woman who finally got tired of being ignored. My father, stripped of his title and his freedom, was serving a 7 to 10-year sentence for embezzlement, securities fraud, and a laundry list of other white-collar sins. He wrote me letters from a federal penitentiary, long, rambling screeds filled with regret and self-pity. They arrived once a week in plain, stamped envelopes. I let them pile up on a corner of my desk, a neat stack of unopened apologies. They weren't for me. They were for him. A final, futile attempt to rewrite his own story. But I was the one holding the pen now. I learned something profound in the ashes of my old life. Revenge isn't about destruction. That's just a byproduct. True, lasting revenge is about building something so magnificent on the ruins of what they tried to take from you that their legacy is reduced to nothing more than a footnote in your own story. It's not just about living well, it's about making sure the person who wronged you has a front row seat to watch you soar. In my new sprawling lab, there's a wall dedicated to our mission. It's covered in schematics, data projections, and photos of the team. And in a small, simple frame in the corner hangs a single, grainy newspaper clipping. It's my father's mugshot. It's not a trophy. It's not there to remind me of my hatred or his downfall. It's there as a quiet, constant reminder of a fundamental choice. Some people, when faced with a legacy of ruin, choose to become a ghost, haunting the past. I chose to become a phoenix and build a better future.